I think everybody knows who Kathy Collins is. But for those few who may not, maybe out in our Zoom world out there, Kathy Collins is a fabulous, wonderful, hysterical, brilliant individual. She didn't actually write that, I just added that in. She is a professional storyteller, MC, radio and TV personality, actress, stand-up comic, newspaper columnist, freelance writer, and is first and foremost a Maui girl. With her pigeon-speaking alter ego, Tita, she has talked story across the state and the mainland from the Hawaii Book and Festival, Music Festival, to the Lincoln Center's Out of Doors Festival in New York City. You are going to just love her talk today and all the different guests that she brings on every other month. Today, she is speaking with Hawaii's Brian Kohne. Brian Kohne is an award-winning music producer, Barefoot Natives, Billy Kay, and an motion picture writer, director, and producer, Get a Job, Uleana. He is an art and radio TV film graduate of San Jose State. He returned to Maui in 2005 from Silicon Valley, having excelled as a national director of sales and marketing in corporate video production, sports broadcasting, and as a senior user interface architect for an interactive television corporation. Kohne is the principal of Hawaii Cinema Incorporated and director of the Academy for Creative Media at UH Maui College. So let's give them a warm Maui welcome, Kathy Collins and Brian Kohne.
Thank you, Deidre, for that wonderful introduction. So happy to be here. So Yakamashi, I think most people know what the definition is. And when Deidre asked me about doing a new series of talks here at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center and said, we want something that's, maybe a little lighter than a lot of the lectures and such, which are all wonderful, the Take Leadership Series, Afternoon with the Author. And I thought, well, how about we just take some time every other month to just talk story, do a little more informal and fun thing. One of the great things I get to do is tell stories professionally. And so I thought, well, we can loosely base it around storytelling, but it's my belief that all of us are storytellers. Some of us do it in more traditional ways, but I thought it'd be great if I could have as my guest each time someone who may not necessarily be a professional storyteller in the sense that I am, but who does, as part of their making a living, tell stories in different ways. So our debut Yakamashi was with Alton Takayama-chung, who is a master storyteller and known to many folks here and in our Zoom audience. And then this time I thought, well, let's change it up a bit. I call him my brother from another mother. Brian Kohne and I have been creative co-workers and partners in crime, as you will, for a number of years. And Brian tells stories. He not only directed films Get a Job and Kuleana, but he wrote them as well. And we're going to talk to him about that. But so first thing I want to ask Brian, though, and Brian did grow up here on Maui. So you know what Yakamashi means.
Yes, in sixth grade, from a teacher of mine, Karen Fukushima at Kula School. That's how I learned Yakamashi. And of course, myself and many others assumed that it meant shut up. So I came to find that it has a greater depth of meaning, though it does cover shut up. So.
That's probably the context in which it was used when you heard it.
Absolutely. And ironically, the following year in Kula School in seventh grade, another instructor, Roy Hashiro, taught us the word kuleana in the context of I don't have my homework. That's not my kuleana. So So I always thought that that meant it's not my problem. So I also came to learn that Kuleana has a greater depth of meaning as well.
I want to touch on Kuleana, the film,
Okay.
a little bit later, but right now, since you bring up Kula
Yeah.
School, can you tell, because I know much of your history, but if you could share with the audience your childhood. So you went to Kula School right through grade school?
No, my family arrived in 1969 from Detroit, Michigan. My father was the 7th attorney here in town, partnered with the late Sandy Langa. So I showed up. I was 5. My brother was 6, and the first place we went was I did kindergarten at Wailuku School, at Wailuku Elementary.
Oh.
Yes, where I also learned what a haole was on day 1. When I came home and had to ask my mom, "What's a haole crab?" And, she was new to the island, so she wasn't too sure herself. But we all figured it out pretty quickly. But then we moved to Kula real early, around 1970, and so I think I went to 1st grade and 2nd grade at Kula Elementary. Kula was really a fabulous place for my brother and I. And then around that same time, Haleakala School was about to get started, and ironically, my mother had a lot to do with that in an unusual way. Benny Denbo, former corp counsel here on Maui, and my mom had become friends, and Benny was looking for an alternative, schooling for her children. And my mother had a friend from grade school in Michigan who was living on Oahu and thinking about moving to Maui. And so my mom introduced Benny and Mary Christopher, and they started Haleakala School around that time. The Waldorf School, which started at Wailuku Union Church, next to Wailuku Elementary. So my brother and I ended up going to Haleakala School for a number of years until 5th grade. Sometime early in 5th grade, I have the distinction, I would add, to be the first one to be thrown out of Haleakala School. A school where you really didn't have to study. It was all about storytelling and make believe and empowerment of the imagination. So really, well, my imagination got overly empowered, and which led to my my being invited not to attend anymore. But timing was really good. We were building a house in Piahi at the time. My family had bought 5 acres out past 5 corners, dirt roads, and way out there. And so I spent the balance of 5th grade working as a carpenter's apprentice, which was really awesome for an artist, hands-on, and not having to go to school, right? Which is kind of cool. 5th grade, yeah. And then 6th grade came along, and my brother by then had started to go to Kula School, even though we lived in Haiku. And so I started to go to Kula School again, starting at 6th grade. So if there's any gap in my academic life, it's 5th grade. So I may attend someday. I might re-enroll and spend a year catching up on all of that. But I sort of flowed right into 6th grade, and Karen Fukushima was so wonderful, and working with a kid who with an overactive imagination and couldn't spell, and arithmetic's still a problem. So Karen, if you're out there, I need help still with that.
Are you able to share with us the incident which prompted Haleakala Waldorf? Or is that something that's told another time?
Oh God, I ran into one of these kids. What I had done was I was a little deviant, and I had figured out that I could train these 2 other kids to do a little shoplifting. And so during lunchtime in Wailuku, we walked down to Crest, and I kind of hung out in the background with a couple of these kids. I was after these Planet of the Apes trading cards. I was really obsessed with Planet of the Apes at the time. And so my 2 minions lifted these cards. Well, the Spanish teacher at the school at the time happened to be eating at the coffee shop at Crest. And so I got called into the office, and I came walking in, and the 2 kids were sitting there. Oh man. So Yeah, busted. Right. That's exactly how it worked out. I ran into one of these guys many, many years later, maybe 10 years ago. And I asked him, why did you know what? You guys didn't learn the first thing about your training, which is you don't rat anybody out. So fortunately, they and I did not continue with a life of crime. I went into carpentry. Yeah.
You were on the work crew.
Yeah. Yeah. Terrible, yeah. Terrible.
Kids. You went to Baldwin High School.
Yeah.
Kula.
Yeah, after Kula, I graduated 8th grade at Kula Elementary. At that time, it went up to 8th grade. It's just a beautiful school. There's 40 of us, I think. And as an aside, when I first moved home about 17 years ago, some of the girls in our class organized just strangely a 27th reunion at Pukalani, community center. So I thought that was really, really far out getting to revisit, and probably about 25 of the 40 showed up to this event, which I figured out after a little while. Well, many of the gals who organized it were, recently divorced, so there was an ulterior motive, right? Which is cool. It was still fine, but it was so funny, Kathy, and I'm sure I told you this before, but it was a wonderful dinner, and everybody sort of refamiliarizing themselves. And then and it was in a small room, probably half the size of this space, and they had a DJ. So suddenly, for about 20 of us, there's disco ball and lights and stuff, and it gets really dark. And that's about the time I figured out what the agenda here was. And but all these years later, 27 years later, all of us still standing against the wall. Kind of afraid, afraid somebody's going to ask us to dance.
Boys on one side.
Oh, boys on one side, girls on the other side. Yeah, and I was like, oh no, I don't know about this one, but yeah. So from Kula School, my family was already living in Wailuku, even though I continued to go to Kula School. Used to get rides. My parents would drop me off in Kahului at another instructor's house, Dan Ledward, so I would catch a ride with Diane from Kahului to Kula School in 7th and 8th grade, which was really great. This is, talk about my past history. I came upon all these special educators, which I think I have to assume is one reason that I found my way to that. But so we were living in Wailuku already. My dad was really set on me going to Seabury, which is insane because I was not very good at homework, let alone arithmetic and and writing. I couldn't write at all, really. I could think, overly active imagination, as I noted. So he settled on, how about St. Anthony? Yeah, you know where this is going. So I attended the first day at St. Anthony, and one of the nuns came by and dropped that rule book off on my desk. And after school, I took it and I walked up from St. Anthony up to my dad's office on Church Street, sat across from him as an attorney, put the book down and said, "You do not want to do this, do you? Do you really want to go through all of this?" And he saw the light and gave in and allowed me to go to Baldwin High School instead, which was a far better choice for me. Fewer restrictions. And I was able to ease my way and find my passions rather than, ending up in an environment where I would not have been able to thrive, and would have no doubt spent an enormous amount of time being disciplined.
It's essential.
Right.
Your dad was Bill Kohne,
Yes.
who was very active in the Democrat Party. And,
He was involved in Big Brothers Big Sisters and in a lot of the symphony, and he was involved in a lot of other things here in the community. He really saw himself as a member of the community, and we found our way to Hawaii through his time in the Marines. He really fell in love with the South Pacific and this other way of living. He passed away in 1989 of cancer, so he's been gone for over 30 years now, but he's certainly alive in a lot of the things that I've been able to do in the last 17 years.
growing up in the 70s on Maui, very different from now. But as a Hawaii kid, did you experience a lot of because I remember when I was going to school, we had Kill Hawaii Day. We also had Slapjack Day.
Oh,
Yeah, because I went to a grade school that had maybe 2 Caucasian kids,
Okay.
but a lot more, Asian kids. And so the tough kids there came up with Slapjack Day instead of Kill
yeah, that was clever.
Holiday.
Yeah.
Overactive imagination.
I guess.
But what was that like? I mean,
In reflection, I certainly didn't have the same level of negative experiences that many others, would report later in life. Others that I knew. And I mean, I certainly know many Hollies who from here who live on the mainland who are never coming back, and they were just so deeply scarred by this, by some of the abuse that they suffered in so many ways. And I'd say for me, I had a couple of things. I was an athlete, so I was able to make friends with some of the bigger and stronger people pretty quick. One of my best friends in Kula School, Aaron Keith, who is here very active in the community and has just reopened and opened Calais Lunchbox, some other restaurants, and he had Cafe 08 for a lot of years. But Aaron and I were best friends, and we really found each other through football and other things. And he was larger, and I was tiny, and so we were sort of a muscle and the mouth thing, So I think I got away with a lot of just being me, just based on my best friend was
because you had Aaron there with you.
laughing at some of the stupid things I would say. So I navigated, but this is also how I found my way to comedy. Without question, for me, my survival skill here was being an athlete. Oh, well, another survival skill is being deviant, because people do, after a little while, kind of question if you're going to mess with a guy who's, kind of a little off, yeah. But humor really became a thing for me. I really started to find early on. I'm not saying I was funny, but I wanted to be, and I really gravitated towards, comics and comedy of the time. I was really influenced by movies that I saw when I was 4, 5, 6, and my parents allowed us to see pretty much anything, which was really great. So a movie like Blazing Saddles comes along and just changes the way I see the world. And so I guess that I was able to navigate a lot of this just by being funny or trying to be or willing to be. But yeah, I mean, Hawaii is a place. However, in reflection, I would point out that this experience was a privilege. It was a deep privilege for me to be able to. I was certainly there was 2 Hollies in my kindergarten class, but I was the only Holly on my little league team, and mostly the only Holly that's throughout my life, and so it definitely informs a lot of the work that I do. And I feel like I have a pretty strong understanding of what it is to be marginalized, or what it is to be, the only one, or the one who doesn't necessarily fit in. And even when I moved to the mainland for college, I'm a soccer player, and I immediately started playing with Portuguese teams, ethnic Portuguese teams. I didn't even know such a thing existed. I only knew about Portuguese, right, on this island. And wow, they even speak a different language. This is crazy. And so I started to play with Portuguese, Iranian teams, and I'd often, once again, so there's all these photographs of me at 18, 19, 20, looking like this, with guys with black hair and thick mustaches.
You had hair then.
I did, but it was blonde.
But it was blonde.
Blondish, brown, I don't know. So yeah, so I'd say that in reflection, it's a really positive experience to have had, but I also had parents that were able to help coach me through this, and I got through it. And it doesn't forgive some of the things that I bore witness to. The last thing I'd say is I also figured out, and I don't remember when, but I figured out at some point that the kids that were bullying based on these esoteric factors The problem was them. The problem was theirs. And I realized it when I was younger. And so I found a way to not take some of this personal. You know, when somebody's beating up on you, who was your best friend a year earlier, but now you're in a different circumstance and they're behaving a different way. I figured out right away this whole other way that the world kind of works. So I never really carried forward grudges or anger about any of this. I came quickly to understand that this is more of a human nature thing. But the one thing I would add though is the only scars I carry from being a Holly growing up here weren't things inflicted by other kids, but by some of the adults, because that's, as a kid, that was something you would experience, and that was something that made it really difficult to reconcile. You know, if a coach were to speak to you a certain way, you know, that those are the things that still sting me today, in retrospect. But I still say that those experiences fuel my art.
And growing up as you did, so as you say, you learned early on and throughout your youth what it's like to be marginalized, but you also grew up learning and embracing a lot of the so-called local values and traditions and style.
Yeah,
So like Yakamashi,
yeah,
but Kuleana. So let's jump over to that. Both of the feature films that you've written and directed and produced are very much local stories. They're two completely different, and I'm not sure who in the audience has seen either or both of those movies. But Get a Job is a fun farce. It's a romp, and was it like 300 local people involved in making that movie? That's the comedy starring Willie Kay and Eric Gilliam. And then Kuleana, which came, what, 8 years later? 6 years later. A much more serious film, but again, very much rooted in local values. And I remember because Brian and I have been close friends for a long time, and I got to proofread and see the dozens of scripts that eventually became the movie Kuleana. And I remember how we talk about while you were still writing it, let alone going on to actually getting the film made, and how you really agonized over presenting these themes properly. It was so important to you that if we're going to make a movie here on Maui, a serious movie, it's got to be done right. It can't be a Hollywood style thing. You really wanted to get into some of the issues that we face here, that we've faced for several generations. I would like you to talk about your inspiration for Korea.
yeah. I think it began when we first moved here. We lived, the first house we lived in was a Kaiser house in Ma'alaya, right by the harbor. And so every day, I was 5 years old, every day was witnessing Pu'alawi, the island of Pu'alawi across the channel, being bombed night and day. And it was horrific. And even while we lived there was an event many people know in which they bombed Maui. And a bomb was dropped in a cane field real close to Ma'alaya. It didn't go off, but just the same. And so all these events are kind of swirling around. So I think that's when the seeds of parts of the story really, burned a hole in my heart. So even before I understood that I was going to do these sorts of things, this is one of the greatest influences, was just witnessing this happening. And at the same time, I would also add, when we lived in that house, as any longtime residents might remember, the movie The Hawaiians, Michener's Hawaiians, was shot here. And Ma'alaya Harbor had been converted at that time into a village, which comprises the first scene of the film. The Carthaginian comes ashore with Chinese immigrants. This is the movie, the Charlton Heston and Geraldine Chaplin. And so two things were going on there. Ku'alawi was getting bombed, and that really hurt me. And I'd ask adults what's going on here, and they'd say, oh, well, the Navy's bombing the island. Like, what? It made no sense, right? To a kid, it makes no sense. And somehow adults had it presented in such a normal way. So that bugged me too, even though I didn't know why. And then here's this movie, this really elaborate thing going on right next door. And I'm running around set and looking at all of this. And my dad was working at the townhouse as an attorney. My mom's working as a bookkeeper at the Wailuku Hotel, where Geraldine Chaplin is staying. And so my brother and I were playing with Charlie Chaplin's grandkids at the pool. And so all of these things were kind of, these movie things for my brother and I, all these movie, what's going on? But so obviously, I could go on for years on any of these subjects. So I'll try to get back onto, the inspiration for this movie. So it started then, and then events in the 70s around Protect Koalabi Ohana and the loss of Kimo Mitchell and George Helm was a big part of, the thing. My family was sort of involved in it, and the access points. Bobby Lubuai, his book, the late Bobby Lubuai, his book, well, they would stage a lot of the stuff at our house. So I had this other privilege of being around a lot of these personalities, Dr. Emmett Aluli and so many other pivotal figures, let alone an awareness when the events in 1977 went down. So all of that really, and then someone in my family continued to be involved all the way through the return of the island and being a commissioner. That's Bert Sakata. So the storytelling was all there. The stories were all there. And even when I lived on the mainland, I was following the Koalabi issues and just really connecting. But when it became clear, this story, I wanted to move home. I was 39, about 17, 18 years ago. I wanted to move home, but every time I came home, I'd look around and go, oh man, if I come home, it's career suicide. I'll never work again. Certainly can't make movies. I can't this, I can't that. Oh God, there's no industry, there's no nothing, there's none of this. And I had carried that attitude for a long time. My attitude about Maui was about what wasn't here. And I had an epiphany at a 40th birthday party for my older brother, Bill Kohne. We kind of got the band back together, people from the early days of Maui Youth Theater, and people were there, and I just looked around and wow. And I just had this moment of being aware of what's here. And so my attitude started to shift. But still, by the end of the week, I came to the same conclusions. There's no movie industry, there's no film, there's no art, there's no, I'll be flat on my back, I'm going to work at a gas station. And so it was the night before I was flying home, and I was staying at a friend's house, Bill Kraft, whose father, Bob Kraft, and Kraft's Drugs, and started by Bill's grandfather. Well, I was staying with Bill, and in the middle of the night, I just woke up in Waihu Terrace, and this story just started flooding me. And I got up and started writing it down. The next morning, I look at it and read it. And I hadn't written it in a long time. Where is this coming from? It's deeply cultural. There's all this. Wow. Okay. So something was there. But it changed my flight another week. And the next night, it happened again. And it happened 3 nights in a row, where after 3 days, I realized on some level, I'll start crying if I go too far here, Cap, that Maui was, kind of telling me time to come back, regardless. And so I did with this project. I set out, and I was in a relationship at the time. So I went back and forth about 15 times that year, coming back, researching and writing the first 3 drafts of what would become Kuleana. And it was all based on these dreams that I was having. And it was a comedy. When you see Kuleana, it's what? That's all I knew how to do, was be funny. And so after a year of that, and this was another pivotal moment, decision to make, I had to say, okay, I want to make this movie. I want to make a movie. Then I had to look at this material and say, who am I? I've been gone for so long, regardless of whatever experiences I might have had. Things have still changed from the Hawaiian Renaissance, if you will, of the 70s into the 80s to now 2000 or whenever it is. We've come so far, and I haven't been here. So I realized that in order to do this right, I needed to put this project on a shelf and move home and live it and revisit someday in a more informed, from a more informed perspective. And so with that decision to take this script and put it aside until the day was right, until I felt like I really understood these issues again, let alone had something to say about them. But I also realized that if people like me who go away and acquire these skills don't come back at some point and put them in service of the community or the culture, then I'm going to be this old guy who's going to be bitter that nobody ever did it for me, that it never happened. I could never move home. And, you know, all the talented people I grew up with on this island, you know, I'm one of the few who has moved home, and many in our industry, in the film industry, entertainment, are still on the other side of the pond, you know, doing their thing. And hopefully someday they'll come home, but they got to come home on their own terms, just as I did. So in terms of the inspiration, I think it was the inspiration for this project was caught up in my own inspiration as to how I was going to continue to live my life. And it was career suicide, make no mistake. But it also led to the birth of so many other careers and going into music with Willie Kay and Eric Gilliam, and then ultimately circling back. And so Kuleana started before Get a Job. Get a Job had its own twisted way that it came about. But by the time Kuleana was shot, I had circled back to it in 2012, felt that I had a greater maturity level with these subjects. And I could probably handle them as somebody other than a comedian. And so I rewrote it another 8 times over 4 years and put the pieces together. And we were blessed to be able to shoot it in 2016. So you look at that work, and it definitely is a reflection of not only a good 10 years of my life, but probably my entire life from the arrival here on Maui.
So when you shelved what was to become Kuleana, you turned your attention to writing another comedy, which didn't deal with the deeper issues of land use, kaho, lave, and all of that, but did deal with local lifestyle and a few issues. But Willie Kay and Eric Gilliam, the Brian managed produced really the Barefoot Natives, which had 2 great albums, a stage show for a while.
And others in our cast, like Kathy Collins, I might add. Barefoot Natives was more than just music. We were anybody who got to see us live, definitely on Maui. It was musical theater, and it was a chance for Eric, you know, us to take some of the skills Eric had. But then it was also Willie and I were working together for the first time, and he had all this raw talent, you know, as in all of these ways. But comedy wasn't something he'd taken on. So he and I started working together. I had enough background in comedy. We started to work together on the principles of comedy. And one thing about Willie was he was fearless. And so in the context of producing and writing for Eric and Willie, I had Eric that will do anything, provided it's scripted real tightly and he has a belief that it'll work. Willie will do anything. And so I was able as an artist to start to mold with these 2 forces of nature. And I think the real gift that I was given, aside from world-class musicians and high-level entertainers and members of this community, but I could write anything for these guys and they'd go for it. And we could walk into any situation, and we did a full-blown play at the MAC that we rehearsed for 45 minutes and then just unleashed it because I knew Willie would go for it, and Eric, as long as he knew what I was asking to do. So I had to write stuff out for Eric. Willie, it was more like, just tell him this what I want this. Okay. So it was really amazing because I could, as an artist, I could write these things, and the music part of it was an afterthought. I never had to stop to think, oh God, will they be able to, perform in a wedding gown and a tuxedo that doesn't fit, walking, it's in the Castle Theater. Can they do it? Well, let's find out. And so Get a Job, the movie Get a Job sort of sprang from the work that we were doing, the three of us as the Barefoot Names, really. Yeah.
Those were some unforgettable moments. Eric Gilliam being serenaded by Willie Kay. As you say, Willie in an ill-fitting tuxedo and Eric in a gorgeous strapless wedding gown and a veil duct taped to his bald head.
Yep.
That was beautiful.
And
Castle.
that video is probably on YouTube if anybody's interested.
I hope
if you Google Barefoot Natives just Maui, you'll probably be able to see that bit. And that's a real good example of, for a comedic writer, the gift that we seldom have, where you're working with entertainers who are so dynamic that you can kind of just dream up anything and bring it to life. Very empowering.
Yeah.
Which is, and I mentioned the career suicide and the return of home in the light of, wow, everything I had to give up. Everything I gave up is nothing compared to what I've been able to experience and enjoy in the 17 to 18 years of being home. On a personal level, but as an artist. So I understand on the context of my narrow little world, what a vital decision it was to move home and to spend the last 18 years creating here and growing here.
Well, and now you've become one of the key facilitators to create the situation here in Hawaii and more specifically Maui. You've helped to pave the way for others to not have to leave to pursue the craft of storytelling through film. So for the last 4 years, you created the Academy for Creative Media at UH Maui College. And you're in your 4th year?
Yeah, completing my 4th year as faculty. Crazy.
Do you want to talk about that? You need
Sure.
to get more people to sign up for the class.
Yeah. I see a lot of candidates here. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's an extension. When I was in San Jose, in the Silicon Valley, and there's a whole chapter in my life that was all equally as blessed. The time I spent there, and the happenstance of going to San Jose State, where I got to play soccer at a really, really high level, and study film and art and graphic design and all these other things. And the Silicon Valley kind of grew up around me while I was there. So there's a lot of privileges that I really got to experience in that context. But part of it was coming out of college. I was a teacher. I taught for 3 years in the inner city schools, art, English as a second language, which was fantastic for a native pidgin speaker. I might add. 18 different languages going on in my classroom, and I didn't care. We all understood each other just fine. So I got to teach for 3 years, from 25 to about 28. And when I had to leave it behind, I was being paid 19 grand a year in a place in a town that it cost 1,500 for a 1-bedroom apartment. So, I think I think that speaks for a lot of people who would love to be working in education. I had to walk away from it when I was 28. I was down for it. I was going to teach middle school, whatever, for the rest of my life. That was my vision at that time, just because the connection and the kids, the sweet kids that I had, they're mostly migrant kids coming in with the farm workers, and they were just so sweet. And I learned so much, and I went home every day exhausted and feeling like I made a difference, It was far more, this was after my dad died too, so it was the healing period of my life. But I really understood that transference that I might have felt like I was giving, but why I was so exhausted at the end of every one of these school days was how much I was receiving from these beautiful children. So I had to leave education behind. And so as the years wore on, I always was sort of pining, how am I going to do this? And while I was here and doing Get a Job, I made myself available. I'd go to elementary schools, high schools, whatever. Somebody wanted me to come and hang out with kids and be a part of that. I did, and I would, and trying to plant seeds about film or media or art and paint a picture. Because myself, my generation, it wasn't that, I left the island in '82 to go to film school or art school. I had to. Couldn't even go to Oahu to do these things. And so I had to go and I had to stay away. As I said, even when I moved home 17, 18 years ago, there was nothing going on Oahu either. So even moving to Oahu for these fields wasn't an option. So this was always just something. So it would have been a while ago, and it was the Vice Chancellor John McKee, who's not on Maui anymore. He retired to the mainland about 3.5, 4 years ago. Well, oddly enough, when he took that job at the college, his wife and he were here the week of the world premiere of Get a Job at the Castle Theater. So Vice Chancellor McKee saw me go off on the Castle Theater stage about the importance of education and opportunities for the arts and media, and painting what I was attempting to paint with this picture of how the youth theater and all of these things in our community were so vital to our growth. And that Get a Job was really an example that we can make movies here, we can create industry here. I had no idea how, but I just went off. And so many years later, he contacted me and we started a relationship, and the college was sort of starting to look at how can they bring this about. And at the state level, there was some energy happening. Chris Lee, who runs Academy for Creative Media Systems, had started to organize, all of the campuses. And so it would have been about 4 years ago. Something was right after Kuleana was done, and I was beat up, but also anxious to make another movie. And opportunities were coming to me finally to make movies and do other stuff. And people were saying, "Hey, we'll fund your next movie," which is a dream for someone like me to hear. But at the same time, Vice Chancellor McKee was expressing this other opportunity that was in front of me, and it was a hard decision. But as Kathy knows, she heard me complain about this when I was really torn. This opportunity to not only teach, but to create a program was there, but I'd be sacrificing what I thought was the opportunities I've been fighting to create. So I took on the college, and for 4 years we've been striving. There's many of us now. There's others on my team, not to mention the leadership, Louis Kokoana, and we have 2 deans, Laura Nagel and Kaheli Duplo, very supportive, and my humanities chair, Mike Takamoto. Kaheli and Mike are both Baldwin graduates as well, and so there's something right about what I took on. But I tell you, after you've been commuting from your bedroom to your office for 15 years, just driving to college was a real problem. Wow, I got a job. This is terrible. I made a movie about how much I don't want to have a job. That whole theme was mine. No, I don't want Merton was me. No, I want to surf every day. I don't want a job, but I took it on, and it's been difficult.
Well, but then the pandemic
wonderful.
came, and then you no longer have to drive to the office.
Yeah, right. I hope that my manifestation to not drive to work didn't affect the rest of you when it finally kicked in. But no, I was never more grateful about any of it from a personal standpoint, that not only did the job sort of become something that was more to my liking during the pandemic, at least, but I'm so grateful to have a job and to have the stability after 15 years of being an independent artist, while my musician, entertainment, and filmmaking friends were all sidelined for a year and a half. I not only had a job, so I had some income, but I got to work on something my heart was connected to that was deeply meaningful and purposeful. So these last few years have been difficult for me as any, but at the same time, I come out of it going, this school is legit now. We now, Academy for Creative Media Maui, we offer degrees in filmmaking, in graphic design, and soon to be animation. you can get a student can attain an associate in science degree from our college as of a few years ago. And we have an agreement with a college on Oahu, UH West Oahu, where our students can continue on for 2 more years without leaving this island and earn their Bachelor of Arts degree. So yeah, I had to leave in '82. A student 3 years ago had to leave. Today, they can stay here. They can work with people like me and others on our instructional team, including Sadine Ota, Say Design. She's working with us now. Is high level. Not only a phenomenal graphic designer, but a powerhouse as a business leader. And others that we're slowly continuing to build this energy around. So we offer this really powerhouse foundational degree here on college, as well as we're having amazing success placing our students in the workforce, which is everybody's right. Historically, for an artist, well, how are you going to work? How are you going to get a job? This is what we hear. This is what kids on this island hear. Well, I'm here to counter those voices emphatically, and we're really seeing it come about in the most beautiful way. I use as a, and sometimes we're too successful. One of our students from Maui High, Josiah Castillo, amazing filmmaker coming out of Maui High and the program that Clint Gima runs. He works with us for a little bit of time. I'm able to get him on a gig last year, an independent film, pandemic era, and he immediately becomes their rock star in their camera department, not as just a go get me coffee guy. And he's worked on 5 movies and 2 TV shows in the last year alone. And the good news is he's thriving, and he's a hell of a filmmaker. And he made a film last year that won a Pele Award. And on the other side is he's not probably going to graduate from our program because we were maybe too successful. So I got to find maybe that balance of how we hold them until they graduate, and then we get them a job. I don't know. But people, the community is starting to recognize that Academy for Creative Media Maui is the place to hire creatives on the island of Maui. It's not in the state of Hawaii. And I'd also brag that we had 2 students, Yasha and Dexter, who graduated a year and a half, 2 years ago, who went on to UHS to Oahu. As I said, they can go on for their BA. They're going to be earning their BA as of this May. And they have both been students of the month at that college multiple times. And that's an award that's voted on by their peers. So our students that have come out of our program are moving into these other programs at a way advanced, certainly in terms of storytelling. They're coming out of our program really with a grip on storytelling, which is a source of pride for our team.
And that's one of the courses in your curriculum, storytelling.
Yeah, it was the first class that I invented.
Yeah.
I call it storytelling, find your voice in creative media. And the whole goal was to give myself a class that I could just do anything I want. And that's basically what I do and what I've done. And I've now taught it 9 semesters in a row, maybe 12 times, because sometimes there's multiple sections. But I just pretty much just look at who's in the room and adapt to them, and we just go. And I think the hardest thing for me is when I'm faced with the idea of having to do the same thing over and over and over again. And so with this class, I don't have to, and I don't, as my students will attest. But they seem to enjoy it, and I think by being limber and being able to adapt to what they want and what they need, the individuals, I just think it makes a huge difference. I do. But the whole program is one. We've created 22 new classes over the last several years, and so there's a whole litany of courses, not for everybody, but certainly for creatives. And we're attracting, during the pandemic online, we started to attract students from all over the state. So that's really made a difference. Some of the creatives are starting to find us. My goofy storytelling class seems to have caught fire around the state. And so the types of students that show up now, it seems like the counselors at all the colleges seem to, know when to say, oh, I've got the perfect class for you. You were kicked out in 5th grade. I'm sending you to Brian. And I do better. I do really well with the kids, the at-risk kids, the kids, that people label at risk. To me, no, these are just island, creatives, people, artists that are being told everywhere they turn not to become who they know they are. And so I think that's part of the thing that we're doing that's kind of special at our college is we're looking at people as individuals and recognizing, who needs to be empowered. The answer is everybody.
And I can attest to your principles because you've been kind enough, gracious enough to have me as a guest speaker at each of your storytelling class.
One of the highlights of the semester, I might add.
And I know part of the reason is there's an hour and a half that you don't have to fill.
I just go crash. I go to my bedroom and I sleep, set the alarm, come back in. Kathy, when's Kathy done? It's not true.
No, it's not. You're always fully engaged. But I've come to really look forward to that class because you have such a wide variety of students. And I remember the very first time it seemed like you had a few people that were honestly there because they wanted to learn about how they can become storytellers through film or, animation or whatever. But you also had people that were obviously there because, okay, this looks like an easy class to take and worth, but now, 3 years later, the makeup of your storytelling classes is just fascinating. This last one that we did, which was all Zoom, of course, you have that retired military officer. You have she was the woman was also ex-military, but considerably older. And then you've got the young ones fresh out of high school that want to pursue a career in filmmaking. And when I get to speak, it's in the first few weeks of your class, so they're just starting to get rolling. But you can see that they're all becoming empowered enough to share, because I can tell from the questions I get from them that they're putting your principles into practice. And it's pretty exciting to see, young local kids and quite eloquent, older folks all coming together and getting jazzed about this opportunity and seeing a future for themselves as artists.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the blessings of the community college system, or UH Maui College, is this multi-generational, much like Nisei Veterans Memorial Center. That it's not a real homogenous, clientele, if you will. So that's one of the most beautiful dynamics in the storytelling class that we operate. It's people of all ages and levels of experience, and that transference. It's remarkable. And just as I would go home teaching middle school, tired and worn out because of all of this incredible, energy that I've received, I'm the one who benefits more than anybody as a storyteller getting to work with all of these beautiful people who share openly and honestly. And so to witness their growth is really, just in the course of a semester, is really amazing. But the growth that I experience is, pretty profound. And insofar as growth, I would also add, and I'm bragging, I'm bragging on behalf of our program. This May, we're going to have 14 graduates of the Academy for Creative Media Maui, 7 of whom will continue for their BA. That's really amazing. Many of them who are already lined up to work here in the community. Let me contrast that to last year, we had 1. 2 years ago, we had 2. So this avalanche is really, testament to my team and the support from the college and the leadership to have given us this opportunity to build something of meaning that, people are finding
It's
and
awesome.
committing to, the students, the 14 graduates, there's actually more than that, because a few of them are our students, but they're liberal arts majors, but 14 creative media graduates. They're just all so wonderful in their own way.
Congratulations.
Yeah. I know I'm going to be crying like a baby in May. Last year you were around. There was one of my only graduate we were at an event. I introduced him. Wait, I'm not that sentimental. I'm not. So going to be 14 times the bride come this May.
Okay, so I know when I invited you to come and do Yakamashi with me, and I told you, well, we'll talk for a while, we'll take questions. We have talked so long, I don't know if we have time for any questions.
We always have time for
Okay.
questions.
Does anybody here have any questions for? Yes.
Yes.
What's the Kaiser house?
Oh, what's a Kaiser house?
Kaiser, it was a family. It was a prominent family here in Hawaii that from Oahu primarily, but they own properties all over the place. And I forget if it was a political figure or I'm really not. Henry Kaiser. Yeah. So
Kaiser.
yeah.
That's,
So,
isn't that
It's
same
the Kaiser
permanente?
prison. And then
oh, it's that guy.
The guy at the clinic.
Yeah, and it was an old sugar shack right on a break wall. And my dad was afraid of mice and Malaya at the time. So we weren't there for too long because and the house was all busted up. Me and my brother, we loved it, except for watching Koalawe. But we would end up getting to live in Malaya again after that. We got to live in a sugar shack before the condos arose right there.
Ryan also lived in a non-Kaiser house, which is now the old by the Korean.
Yes, the old Makino house. Our family was fortunate to live there in the late 70s into the early 80s. Yeah, amazing home.
Yes.
I know you're talking about the kids are able to stay here to study.
Yeah.
When they go to work, do most of them need to go to the mainland, or are there that many jobs for that you can fill 14 jobs?
Yeah, that's an open question, but there's more jobs in the arts today than ever before. And I think the pandemic really made it clear the importance of media. And when we talk about a skill like animation's at the core now. It's not simply Disney and things that we think of. It's at the core of gaming design and so many other emergent forms of media, social media. Every company needs a web video, whether they know it and are willing to acknowledge it or not. The real estate community here, it's all about media and marketing. So yeah, there's jobs. It just depends on the individuals and what they want for themselves. We're placing students because there's a nice film industry starting here. So a lot of our students are getting on these sets, like I said, and then sometimes they go there and they don't come back. Yes.
So as part of the curriculum, getting these kids to understand how to work as a freelancer as well, or a contractor, trying to find gigs in if they can't find an actual full-time job, then how to find what.
Yeah.
What they can do.
Yeah. The question is, what are the outcomes of this program? And there's 3 primary outcomes, and that's for somebody who wants to go into business for themselves as a freelancer or start their own company. We have students who do that all the time. Again, we also lose students who don't get their degrees because they start their business, they start thriving, and then that's it. They don't complete their degree. This has been the last 3 years we've experienced that. But then entering the workforce, which we're starting to really have success with, and coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people are starting to hire. So people are knocking on our door all the time. And then the other primary outcome is continuation for a 4-year degree, which I, strongly advocate as someone who couldn't write and didn't know Minnesota was a state until I was a sophomore in college, to now be a college professor and considered a professional writer. I feel like there's opportunity for everybody. It's kind of where I'm coming from. And yeah, so we're having success in all three of these ways. So again, and that's why I start the storytelling classes mostly for the first semester, because then I have this opportunity to meet people, understand them as humans, and help guide and shape as they work with their skills, and the other members of our team who are all really gifted, such as Sadine, and another graphic designer is Mark Antosh, who is the graphic designer at the college. He's brilliant. And so Sadine and Mark, just the two of them, this is a powerhouse graphic design education. And I have a degree in graphic design too, which is cool. Though I'm not a graphic designer. Yeah, so there's all these different outcomes, and so it really depends on what someone wants. And so I sounded like I was complaining that we lose graduates or people who don't graduate because they start succeeding. I'm proud to say that that's part of the flow here. Is people spend a little time, they get a little opportunity, they get a little little confidence, and then they thrive. So yeah, it's all very holistic too, so we have no idea what the true impact of this program will be. I think another 5 years from now, we'll have more than just my intuition or anecdotal evidence.
Oh, yeah, you'll have a lot of hard, concrete evidence there to show.
And when my filmmakers start making movies that I get to watch, that I don't have to write and fund and finance and live through, that's the day that I look forward to. For me personally, as a filmmaker.
Another level of success.
Yeah.
I know we had some audience. I don't know if they had any questions.
I think they were just enthralled. listening.
We're asleep.
No. I think that.
Okay, Brian, thank you so much for being my guest. Thank you to Melanie and Deidre and the board of directors here at the Nisei Veterans Memorial Center for allowing people like Brian and me to come and take over the space and just talk story for an hour. This was the fastest hour I've been through in a long time. It went very quickly.
As Kathy knows, if she wanted to, she could ask me one question.
And
1 hour gonna be wow.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of you, both here at the center and out there in online. Thank you so much for joining us. Next Yakamashi will be in June. I forgot what the date is. Usually we do it on the first Saturday, but this time it's going to be at the 15th, is it?
I think so, toward the end of the month, but everybody needs to sign up for the weekly Wednesday update and they will know exactly what date it is.
That's right. Get yourself on the mailing list, the email list for the weekly Wednesday update. Bye. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me, Kathy, and me say, and all of you. This is the first time I told Kathy, this is the first time that I've gotten to, talk in front of a crowd in 2 years. The last time was in March, whatever, when we got word that that I was with my students, and I got to explain to them that after spring break we're not coming back, and we don't know when we're going to see each other again. So this opportunity was more important and special for me than I think anybody might imagine. So mahalo for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.